Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time the question comes to us from Fascist Gamer, who asked, "Hey Thor, I would like to know your thoughts on making the Last Skywalker a villain, because with JJ wanting Rey to be a Kenobi and making Kylo a through-and-through Darksider, it seems as though Disney was content with killing off the main characters of their own franchise. But it's not like they wanted to move on from the Lucas era when they still wanted Rey to be connected to the old characters, either a Kenobi or Palpatine. Maybe it could have worked if JJ didn't also destroy the Republic and Jedi again, ensuring the Skywalkers left no real legacy." And actually here, I do think the original goal or plan with the sequel trilogy was to move away from the Skywalkers by the end of it. I think what Disney wanted to do was to move on from what you might call more old school Star Wars, and to take it in new directions with new characters played by younger actors, and to of course use those younger characters and actors in more stories beyond the sequels, which we're still seeing with the upcoming Rey movie, I guess. It seems like they haven't given up all hope on salvaging something from the sequels and moving on to their own time period, if you will. Though that's assuming that film actually gets made and comes out someday, which, from all we've heard, Lucasfilm seems hell-bent on it right now, at least under Kennedy. We'll see what happens in the years to come. But anyway, I think their original idea for Star Wars was not to lean into the Skywalker saga or the time period around it quite as much as they have in the past few years. That the reaction to the sequels, that no one seemed to really like or care about their new characters so much, that it kind of forced them to change their plans to go back to what worked instead of pushing the story forward. Not that they'll ever fully move on or away from the Skywalker saga. There will, of course, always be books and comics and probably shows and stuff attached to it in some way, shape, or form. There's obviously still money to be made from it, so they'll never completely abandon it. But I do think they realized from the start that eventually that well was kind of run dry, that you can only go back to it so many times or use it so frequently before it just gets old or the characters kind of become stale before they've done everything. Hence why I think one of their top priorities was to indeed create new icons of Star Wars with the sequel trilogy, and not to use the old ones quite as much as I think a lot of fans were hoping for. And if this was indeed their mindset from the very start, wanting to move on with Star Wars from the very start of the Disney era, to move away from the Skywalkers or quickly move away from them, it might just explain a great many things about the sequels. Like, for example, as Adam Driver himself has recently confirmed, why they were okay with Kylo Ren, the last Skywalker, indeed being a Darksider through and through, and seemingly eventually dying at the end of the new trilogy and ending the Skywalker line forever. It also explained why they were okay with what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi. I mean, I've seen a lot of people over the years asking how they let him do that with that film, or how they let him do that to Luke Skywalker in that film, how they, Disney and Lucasfilm, didn't realize the reaction it would get from many fans. When in reality, the movie, from their point of view, it may have been exactly what they wanted it to be and done exactly what they wanted it to do, or what they thought it would do. I don't think they realized just how negative the reaction would be from so many fans in regards to Luke. They had to expect some of that, but maybe not quite as much as they got. But anyway, what that film did was give Luke Skywalker what they thought would be this very huge and dramatic and amazing death scene. It would please the fans of him and allow them to let go of their favorite character after his grand finale, as well as making Rey a nobody and going with the very Disney theme of anyone and everyone can be special no matter where you come from, that when you wish upon a star, it doesn't matter who you are. To me, from a business perspective, that's pretty much the only reason you make Rey a nobody instead of making her attached to the story in a more profound way, or being related to the Skywalkers, or making her a Palpatine or a Kenobi or something. It just feels off to make the main character of a Skywalker trilogy not a Skywalker or anything associated with them. It feels like you wanted her to help move the story away from all that. And so that's why I think Disney was more than okay with what The Last Jedi was. It wasn't that they didn't understand what Rian Johnson was making and the trouble it may cause them, though again, I don't think they understood the full extent of it. But they thought it was going to be the film that sort of ushered in a brand new age of Star Wars, a non-Skywalker age, while also paying homage to Luke Skywalker. And hence, Rian Johnson was even promised his own trilogy before that movie even came out. And this was, of course, also done after The Force Awakens had first paid homage to what Star Wars had been on the whole. As I've said before, I was not surprised in the least that Episode 7 was a nostalgia fest. I think they wanted to give fans old Star Wars one last time before they showed them where it was going next or what it was going to become. But of course, The Last Jedi was not welcomed as warmly as they hoped it would be, and they realized that maybe these new characters weren't going to be all they wanted them to be, and that they had to bring back the old to try and save the new. Right down to scrapping the Rey is a nobody idea and making her a Palpatine, and of course bringing back Palpatine himself along with it. And her Rey then taking on the name Skywalker at the end, which also probably had the opposite reaction to what they were hoping for or expecting. In other words here, going back to the comment, I do think Disney was okay with killing off their old characters, and they wanted to move away from what you might call George Lucas Star Wars. And I know a lot of people think The Last Jedi happened in response to The Force Awakens, that so many fans complained about it being nothing but a remake of the original of A New Hope, that Disney and Lucasfilm then went in the exact opposite direction again in response. However, Rian Johnson wrote The Last Jedi long before The Force Awakens came out, and as far as we know, not much of anything was changed after The Force Awakens came out. And that, in all reality, Rian Johnson and his film had more impact on The Force Awakens than the other way around, given Johnson asked Abrams to change the ending of The Force Awakens and the way that Rey would find Luke, with him originally being found meditating with rocks floating around him. And so all of this means that Disney and Lucasfilm were more than okay with what Rian Johnson was doing from the very start, or again before The Force Awakens even came out. For all we know, they were again kind of encouraging him to take Star Wars in this brand new direction. And if anything, the reaction to The Force Awakens only instilled confidence in them that they'd made the right call. Hearing so many people kind of complain about it being too much like the old may have bolstered their confidence in it being something new, which could have also contributed to the idea to give Rian Johnson his own trilogy. But, of course, that trilogy is very, very unlikely to ever happen. There's virtually no way that Rian Johnson ever does anything Star Wars ever again, considering he, along with Kathleen Kennedy, have become the poster children of the mistakes of the Disney era. And if you somehow want to argue there hasn't been any mistakes, that everything is going great or as intended with Star Wars, well, I'd ask you, where are all the Star Wars movies since the sequels ended? Why will there be, at minimum, a 7-year gap between The Rise of Skywalker and whatever is next, when the plan, said by Bob Iger himself once upon a time, was at least one movie a year? Anyway, while I patiently wait for that answer, I'll go on to point out the irony that, in a way you could argue, the Disney plan to move away from the Skywalker saga that they seemingly had from the start was a good one, or the right one, sort of anyway. I do think playing around in this time period, tampering with all the lore in order to squeeze out more stories, or squeeze in more stories if you will, like the Kenobi series does for example, is doing far more harm than good. I think they were right to want to move on to their own things, and it's exactly what they need to do now. They need to create something new with Star Wars before they proceed to completely destroy the old and make it so that no one cares about anything they may eventually come up with. Though that said, I do think they shouldn't have started to move on with the sequel trilogy. I do think they shouldn't have, say, blown up the Republic and told us that Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order had failed off-screen. They should have made the sequels a true continuation and completion of the Skywalker saga. Not that Return of the Jedi didn't already do that, but if you wanted to carry on the story, and considering all the money to be made off the sequels to the original trilogy, of course Disney was going to want to make a sequel trilogy, but if they wanted to carry on the story and make episodes 7, 8, and 9, they should have leaned heavily into the old, and not in the way The Force Awakens did by basically retelling the story of A New Hope, but by again being a true continuation of it and, as I've suggested many, many times before, presenting a new threat both for Luke's Jedi Order and the New Republic to overcome, something that causes them to bend but not break in the end, and thus strengthens them long run, and makes us believe they'll endure for another 1,000 years, which, funny enough, is what I think Disney should do with Star Wars. Take the story 1,000 years into the future, and finally leave, more or less, everything with the Skywalker saga alone. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any and all of this. Or you can, of course, ask a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. Whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.